Well, as America gears up for the next presidential election, with voting in the Republican primaries well underway, the key focus is whether President Obama has delivered on his promises. But both at home and abroad, there's often just as much interest in his glamorous wife, Michelle. A book just out entitled The Obamas examines life in the White House and how it's affected their relationship. The author is New York Times journalist Jodi Kantor, and I spoke to her earlier. Jodi Kantor, what does definitely come out in your book is a clearer impression of Michelle Obama and her views of the presidency and how it should operate. Is that what you intended?
You know, I think the way we look at First Ladies, right, is that we see them smiling on TV or clapping supportively at what their husbands say, and we almost pretend, in a way, that that their views don't matter, that they don't experience the presidency deeply. You know, there's this kind of fiction on TV that the First Lady always agrees with what's happening in the administration, and clearly that's not true.
How do you think that the marriage and family life has changed as a result of being in the White House with a young family?
It's changed tremendously. You know, the irony is that this is the first time that the Obama family has lived together under the same roof full-time. Because Barack Obama was always a legislator who commuted to the Illinois state capitol and to Washington, he was never with his family all the time. So the first time they're trying to have a quote-unquote normal family life is in the White House, of all places. And yet the White House is a place where it is impossible to have a normal family life. So on the one hand, they really do try to give it sort of structure and routine. The president has a very unusual rule, which is that he'll only miss dinner with his family twice a week, barring extenuating circumstances. And, you know, I reported that information, and I found that Americans have reacted. There's been a real range of reactions to that. You know, on the one hand, people really respect his commitment to his family. They see that it's the real deal and not fake. On the other hand, people have said, wait a second, I just have a regular job and I have to miss dinner with my family a couple nights of the week. Shouldn't the President of the United States be available to work all the time?
It's a dramatic lifestyle change for them. Do you think a sense of fear for their own safety pervades their way of life now?
You know, they almost never talk about security. They never voice their concerns, but it's absolutely a constant. There's a story in the book of the Obamas having dinner the night that Gabrielle Giffords, the Arizona congresswoman, was shot. And it was told to me by Valerie Jarrett, one of their advisors who was at the dinner. And you know, this was a case of an Arizona congresswoman just speaking to constituents at a shopping center when a man with a gun came up and killed several people and shot her in the head. And according to Jarrett, you know, the president and first lady just sat around saying, who would possibly run for office under these circumstances? How are we going to get good public servants to stand up and run for these offices when these are the kinds of risks that are now involved?
Your book does give accounts of tensions between Michelle Obama's office and the West Wing. The Vogue fashion shoot, I think, was one prime example that you gave. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Michelle Obama was invited to appear on the cover of Vogue during the transition, right before inauguration, and her advisors split on the issue, and it was very uncomfortable because they split by race, even though the group of women is quite close-knit. And the African Americans in the group really wanted her to do it because very few women of color have appeared on the cover of Vogue, and both Obamas are very conscious of the negative stereotypes of African Americans and trying to reverse them. They say that it's part of why they ran for the presidency in the first place, was to wipe out some of these negative images. And so some of the African American women in the group, including Michelle Obama, talked about what it would mean for little girls to see a black first lady on the cover of Vogue. On the other hand, the white advisors tended to be more concerned about the economy. This was really the point at which the American economy looked like it was sliding off a cliff, and the public was just so resentful of banker bonuses and foreclosures and job losses. And their concern was that Vogue is a pure luxury magazine. It cost $5 on the newsstand, which is what some people pay for their lunch. And they also said to her, Michelle Obama, you're a person of substance. Do you really want to be known as America's #1 fashionista? So anyway, she does the cover of Vogue, and the article is very mild, and she's not really criticized at all. But the reason I like that story is that it shows how the role model job is kind of a double-edged sword.
She won on the Vogue fashion shoot, and you say that her husband does constantly seek her approval. But how much sway does she really have over a lot of decision-making?
It's of a very private nature. In the book, I tried to get away from the cliche of the meddling woman, right? The first lady who's running things from behind the scenes or who's bursting into the West Wing to mess with policy decisions. It's not like that at all. Her influence is very strong, but it's very private. It runs through her husband, and it has to do with really holding him to the original mission of the Obama presidency, reminding him why he ran in the first place.
Do you think the Obamas are suspicious of the Washington establishment, and that can make life pretty lonely in the White House?
Oh, they are explicitly suspicious of the Washington establishment. They ran against the Washington establishment, and that did make their arrival in Washington awkward. And they've basically made no secret about the fact that their priority is not to spend their time sort of schmoozing and backslapping and engaging in the sort of old-fashioned Washington social graces.
They promised a lot, but do you think they've failed to live up to the American public's expectations and quite possibly their own?
In the presidency, your greatest assets can also be your greatest weaknesses. And his greatest asset in 2008 was the incredible hope and faith and belief and expectation that people had. And that has turned out to hurt him, because for people who are disappointed with him, the sort of depth of their disappointment and in some cases sense of betrayal is even deeper.
Jodi Kantor, I'm sure there are a lot more stories, but we'll have to leave it there. Thanks for taking the time to join us.
Thank you so much.